This is Friday, November the 13th. We are beginning lesson 13. The election of 1844 would be against two candidates, neither of which were incumbents. Now, this hasn't happened for an awful long time in American history. The only thing that both the Democrats and Whigs agreed on was they did not want John Tyler. In 1844, the election would hinge on the concept of manifest destiny and who owned property outside the United States. One of the properties was Oregon. Now, the British said that they claimed Oregon because of the voyages of Francis Drake and Roger Cook, but they didn't have many people living in the area. The Russians laid claim to Oregon because of the claims of Vitus Bering and trading posts where Russians would trade for furs caught by the Indians, but again, there weren't many Russians. The Spanish and later the Mexicans laid claim to Oregon based on the various conquistadors, but again, there weren't many people living in Oregon that were Spanish. And finally, there was the Americans. The Americans laid claim to Oregon because of the voyages of this man, Roger Gray. It was Gray who was the first American to sail up the Columbia River. And then, of course, the exploration of Lewis and Clark. Now, of the four countries, the U.S. and Great Britain probably had the strongest claims. Both of them had their citizens living in what was called the Oregon Territory. Now, notice on the map how far up the Oregon Territory goes. It goes well up into what today we would call Alaska. Now, in 1819, as part of the Rush-Begot Agreement, the Americans and British had agreed that both sides would be allowed to occupy the land. And in 1829, this would be during Jackson's time, the agreement was continued. Now, in between then and 1844, men like Jim Bridger and James Beckwourth would explore much of the northern Rockies. They began to establish trading posts in the Rockies. And then, of course, they blazed trails for Americans to go to Oregon and Northern California. All of this came to a head in 1844. Now, in 1844, the Whigs wanted to nominate Henry Clay. Now, if you're keeping track, this is Clay's third attempt to become president of the United States. The Democrats were torn. Some of them wanted Martin Van Buren, and some of them wanted Lewis Cass. This is a portrait of Lewis Cass. Now, Democratic rules say that 2/3 of the convention had to agree on a candidate, and the Van Buren people would not agree to Cass, and the Cass people would not agree to Van Buren. Enter this man, James K. Polk. Now, James K. Polk was Speaker of the House, and he was acceptable to both the Cass people and the Van Buren people. Polk became a dark horse. Now, a dark horse is a person who goes to the convention as a delegate, but comes out as the party's nominee. Again, goes to the convention as a delegate and comes out the party's nominee. For the third time, Henry Clay is going to lose the election. Now, if you look at the top pie chart, you can see that from an electoral college standpoint, it was a pretty easy victory for Polk. If you look at the bottom pie chart, it was very close. Neither candidate was able to get over 50%. What I always find interesting is that Clay won Tennessee, and of course, Polk was from Tennessee. By the 1844 elections, more Americans had arrived in Oregon than British. and the American government refused to sign another joint occupation treaty. In fact, as Polk was running for president, he issued the slogan 54-40 or fight. Now 54 degrees 40 minutes latitude would be about where Genoa, Alaska is today. Now that would encompass almost all of British Columbia, Canada today. Once the election was over though, both sides agreed to the 49th parallel. Now the 49th parallel had been established in the Rush-Begot Agreement during the Monroe administration. And this parallel line was simply drawn to the Pacific Ocean. This is our current border today. Well, with Great Britain and Canada settled, now the question turned to Texas. Tyler had admitted Texas into the Union as one state, but hostilities between the United States government and the Mexican government began to occur almost overnight. Now the question is, where exactly is the border of Texas? The Americans said it's this river here, the Rio Grande. The Mexicans said no, it's this river here, the Nachos. Now obviously that's a lot of land that is in dispute. Well, if it's in dispute, we better get somebody there to lay our claim. And that's what this gentleman is. This is General Zachary Taylor. He is going to take an army into the disputed land to safeguard American property and lives. At the same time, President Polk is going to send this man, John Slidell, to Mexico City. Slidell was authorized to pay $5 million for the New Mexico territory and $25 million for the rest of the Mexican cession, which was primarily California. The Mexicans refused to even see Slidell, and this of course caused hurt feelings. General Taylor's troops are going to clash with Mexican troops along the Rio Grande River. President Polk will go to the Congress and ask for a declaration of war, and Congress will agree to the Mexican-American War. This here talks about the beginning of the war. Well, the Mexican-American War is going to be fought on 3 fronts all at the same time. Now the idea was the Mexican army may be able to defeat our army in one place, but not in 3 places. So let's look at the first front. The first front is a combination. Stephen Kearny is going to leave Fort Leavenworth, Kansas with a cavalry brigade, that's about 800 men, and he's going to attack Santa Fe. Now Santa Fe surrenders without firing a shot. Kearny now heads towards Southern California. At the same time Kearny had gone south, John C. Fremont is going to take a much smaller group across the mountains into Northern California. Here he will organize the people living in California that are not loyal to Mexico, and he will create a California revolution. Now, with Kearny taking Santa Fe and Fremont's militia taking Northern California, they then began to move toward San Diego and Los Angeles. With California firmly secure, California declares its independence and calls itself the Bear Flag Republic. Now, while all of this is going on, Front 2 is beginning. In Front 2, General Zachary Taylor is going to take mostly state militias across the Rio Grande River, and he's going to attack Mexican troops first at Monterrey and later Buena Vista. Now Monterey is up here and Buena Vista is down here. Both of these will be great American victories. At Buena Vista, Americans will seize the high ground and they will force the Mexican troops under Santa Anna to attack them. Again, it is a great victory for the Americans. Now, as the battle is being fought, Taylor is going to talk about Missouri troops led by this man, Sterling Price. Now, Sterling Price was the commander of the Missouri militia. Price will use his victories at Monterey and Buena Vista when he returned to Missouri to run for governor of this state, and he would serve 2 terms. Well, we've got the bulk of the fighting done, but we still have one more phase. And that next phase is an invasion of Mexico. Now here you can see a map of Mexico. Now this would be Buena Vista, and down here would be Mexico City. The Americans are going to land at Veracruz. Veracruz is on the coastline of Mexico. With that, Santa Anna, who has been fighting the Americans at Buena Vista, will be forced to retreat to Mexico City. There, he will encounter American Army troops under the command of Winfield Scott. These American Army troops will fight a battle from Veracruz to Mexico City. Now, one of the standouts in the American Army at this time was an artillery unit that was commanded by Robert E. Lee. At the same time, another Civil War hero, Ulysses S. Grant, will be put in command of a brigade of infantry. Well, the fighting comes to a close in 1847 when Mexico City falls to the Americans, and Santa Anna will sue for peace. Well, we'll look at the peace treaty and what happened after the war when we look at our notes on Monday.